Hello dear students, welcome to module 1 of literary criticism. This module is titled Classical Criticism. You will be learning 4 classical critics as part of this module. You will learn 2 critics belonging to the Greek and also 2 critics belonging to the Rome. You will learn Aristotle and Plato, who are Greeks in origin. You'll also learn about Longinus and Horace, who are Romans. We'll begin with Plato. Now, if someone asks you who is Plato, then your plain response should be he is an ancient Greek philosopher who was the student of Socrates, who was the teacher of Aristotle and also the founder of Academy. Academy is the name of the institute that he began in the ancient times. Now, due to lack of primary sources from the time period, much of Plato's life has been constructed by scholars through his writings and the writings of contemporaries and classical historians. Now, we do not have exact dates as to his birth, his death, the years in which his works were composed. So we always use the adjective circa with the dates, which means approximately. You might find the usage of that word in your textbook as well. Now he is believed to have been born in 428 BC in Athens in Greece, and is believed to have died in 348 BC in Athens. Now, he was born into a wealthy and noble family in Athens. Plato's father died when he was young, and his mother remarried her uncle, who was a Greek politician and ambassador to Persia. Plato is believed to have had 2 full brothers, 1 sister, and a half brother, though it is not certain where he falls in the birth order. Often members of Plato's family appeared in his dialogues. Historians believe this is an indication of Plato's pride in his family lineage. As a young man, Plato experienced 2 major events that set his course in life. One was meeting the great Greek philosopher Socrates. Socrates' method of dialogue and debate impressed Plato so much that he soon became a close associate and dedicated his life to the question of virtue and the formation of a noble character. The other significant event was the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. As you might be aware of, the Peloponnesian War was a war fought in ancient Greece between Athens and Sparta, the 2 most powerful city-states in ancient Greece at that time. This war shifted power from Athens to Sparta, making Sparta the most powerful city in the region. In this particular war, Plato served for a brief time between 409 BCE and 404 BCE. The defeat of Athens ended its democracy, which the Spartans replaced with an oligarchy. Now, oligarchy means a small group of people having control of a country or an organization. 2 of Plato's relatives were prominent figures in the new government, part of the notorious 30 tyrants whose brief rule severely reduced the rights of Athenian citizens. After the oligarchy was overthrown and democracy was restored, Plato briefly considered a career in politics. He was preparing for a career in politics when the trial and eventual execution of Socrates happened in 399 BCE, and this changed the course of his life. Moving on to slide 2. Now, the death of Socrates affected him a lot, and therefore he decided to abandon his political career and he turned to philosophy. He opened a school on the outskirts of Athens dedicated to the Socratic search for wisdom. Plato's school was known as the Academy. It is generally regarded as the first university in Western history. It remained open from 387 BCE until when it was eventually closed by the Christian Emperor Justinian I in 529 CE. Over its years of operation, the Academy's curriculum included astronomy, biology, mathematics, political theory, and philosophy. Plato hoped the Academy would provide a place for future leaders to discover how to build a better government in the Greek cities. Now, after the death of Socrates, Plato started traveling. He traveled for around 12 years throughout the Mediterranean region, studying mathematics with the Pythagoreans in Italy and geometry, geology, astronomy, and religion in Egypt. During this time, or soon after, he began his extensive writing. Now, his writings can be divided into three periods. In the first period, he wrote the Apology of Socrates, which seems to have been written shortly after Socrates' death. Other texts in this time period include Protagoras, Euthyphro, Hippias Major and Minor, and Ion. In these dialogues, Plato attempts to convey Socrates' philosophy and teachings. And in the second period, the most popular work that he wrote is the Republic. He started writing in his own voice about central ideas of justice, courage, wisdom, and moderation of the individual and society. Now, his Republic was written during this time with its exploration of just government ruled by philosopher kings. Now, in the later writings, Plato takes a closer look at his own early metaphysical ideas. He explores the role of art, including dance, music, drama, and architecture, as well as ethics and morality. In his writings on the theory of forms, Plato suggests that the world of ideas is the only constant and that the perceived world through our senses is deceptive and changeable. Plato's final years were spent at the academy and with his writing. The circumstances surrounding his death are clouded, though it is fairly certain that he died in Athens around 348 BC. As I said earlier, the exact dates regarding his composition of works as well as his birth and death are a bit confusing. He died when he was in his 80s. Some scholars suggest that he died while attending a wedding, while others believe he died peacefully in his sleep. But Plato's impact on philosophy and the nature of humans has had a lasting impact far beyond his homeland of Greece. His work covered a broad spectrum of interest and ideas: mathematics, science, nature, morals, and political theory. His beliefs on the importance of mathematics in education have proved to be essential for understanding the entire universe. His work on the use of reason to develop a more fair and just society that is focused on equality of individuals established the foundation for modern democracy. So that is all about Plato. Now we will move to the content that has been incorporated into our textbook. All the details I shared regarding Plato has been taken from outside. It's good that you have an understanding regarding the biography of this great classical writer, because it's with him that literary criticism begins. Now, as we read the history of literary criticism, we understand that there were writers earlier who might have contributed much to the growth or the origin of literary criticism, but unfortunately, we don't have any of those texts. It's with Plato that we began to retrieve texts, at least in partially dismantled manner. So we will move to whatever that has been given in the textbook. Now, our textbook focuses more on Plato's views on poetry and art. Now, it is often said that the history of Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato. He was the first to expound a theory of art in general terms, and his views have exerted a strong influence on every generation of thinkers who came after him. Any discussion on the general nature of literature must begin with Plato, whose views are diverse and even contradictory. Now you will understand why I stated that his views are contradictory soon. For instance, on the one hand, he is opposed to art as an end in itself, and on the other hand, he glorifies and extols the artist and emphasizes his role in human life. So, there you have an example regarding why his ideas turn sometimes contrary. Now, you have famous writers glorify him in certain exemplary statements, like what Philip Sidney said about him is popular. So Philip Sidney paid him the most extravagant tribute when he said that, "Of all philosophers, I have esteemed him most worthy of reverence, and with great reason, since of all philosophers he is the most poetical." So look at how Sidney appreciates his contribution towards philosophy and towards literary criticism. We also have Shelley talking about his greatness. Shelley says that Plato exhibits the rare union of close and subtle logic with Python. And Python is the priestess of Apollo at Delphi who transmitted the oracles. So Shelley compares Plato to Pythian enthusiasm for poetry. Now, Plato is also regarded as the enemy of poetry, and this is where we come to the understanding that his ideas at times are contrary in nature. Now, in Book 10 of the famous Republic, he banishes all poets from his ideal state. He exiles poets on two grounds. The first is the metaphysical, and the second, ethical. All art, being fiction, is untrue and necessarily twists and distorts truth, the attainment of which is the goal for man. So, seeking ultimate truth through art and poetry, that is what Plato intended. But unfortunately, poetry doesn't do this. Art is an imperfect reflection of the real world, which in turn is a shadow, a pale reflection of the ideal world. Hence, art, an imitation of an imitation, is thrice removed from reality. Please remember that this is the most famous coinages of Plato, that art is, or poetry is, thrice removed from reality. What occurred in the beginning was an idea, probably with God. Later on, this idea was materialized into our universe. So, the universe is already an imitation of the idea which existed in the beginning. Now, what poets write is an imitation of an imitation. So, their works, the poems that they write, becomes thrice removed from the reality, and according to Plato, that reality is the idea which God had. That is why he says that poetry is thrice removed from reality. Arts are third-hand distortions of truth. That is what Plato says. This view goes by the name of the doctrine of ideas or forms. Now, the second objection is on the ground of ethics. Plato regarded the study of morals as basic and wanted all arts to be guided by moral principles. Imitative art has a corrupting influence on man, who should be governed by reason and not passion. This is what he underlines. A man should be governed by his reason and not by his passion. A philosopher is the moral custodian of the welfare of his people. He has a right to stand in opposition to any form of artistic imitation that deviates from the norms of reason. Hence, he condemns poetic imitation on the ground that it fed and watered the passions instead of drying them up, and let them rule instead of ruling them as they ought to be ruled, with a view to the happiness and virtue of mankind. So these are the two grounds on which Plato banished all poets and poetry from the ideal republic. As I said earlier, he banishes them on two grounds. One is the metaphysical, and that is where he says that poetry is thrice removed from reality, and the next is the ethical, in which he says that poetry feeds passion to men. It feeds on their passion. It denigrates them of their reason. It disintegrates their reason. And based on these two grounds, he admonishes them and also banishes them from his ideal state, which is called the republic. Now, coming over to some of the other points that he shares in his works that has been incorporated into a textbook. He advocates strict censorship and exhorts poets to inculcate in people the moral virtues of forbearance, tolerance, and rectitude. Plato favors the narrative form more than the imitative form. He favors the narrative form more than the imitative form, because he believes that the imitative form represents evil directly. In Book 5 of Republic, Plato has a positive view of art. It's not that he completely rejects art and artists. He has some good opinions regarding art as well. Now, he says that it contributes to the spiritual growth of people. Imitation, which performs such a function, has a principal place in his view. Truth is the end in such imitation and not pleasure. So this is what the critics who came later on argued against. Plato said that it is the search of truth. It is ultimately the search of truth that must happen through art, and art is not for pleasure. Later on, Aristotle and every other critics who came forward, we see that they objected to this particular view of Plato. Though much of the modern criticism derives from Aristotle rather than Plato, whenever we discuss problems relating to value, truth, and social significance of literature, we find that there is a storehouse of knowledge available in Plato. As a pathfinder, he inspired people and gave direction to criticism and stimulated it. So this is all about Plato. Let's just sum up whatever that we said in this particular module. We began with an introduction to Plato. I spoke about his family. I spoke about his interest in politics. I spoke about how he began an institute. I spoke about the three periods of his writing career. And then we came to the content that is shared in your textbook. Your textbook primarily deals with why Plato has banished poets and poetry from his ideal republic, and this he does on two grounds as discussed earlier. We also spoke about some of the additional points that has been shared in your textbook. This is all that has to be discussed as far as Plato is concerned. Thank you for watching. In the next video, I'll be talking about Aristotle. See you in the next video. Thank you.